Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Called to Love podcast, where we discuss all things adoption and foster care and dive into the practical, the clinical, and most importantly, the biblical perspectives to help you and your family thrive. I'm Summer Colbert, adopted mom, director of adoption and foster ministry, and champion for the Arkansas Baptist Children and Family Ministries. Adoption and foster care aren't just a process. They are both unique invitations to go on a journey with the Lord, where you will experience life-changing opportunities to grow in your faith and learn to love in an entirely new way. One thing is for sure, being called to love means you will never be the same. Welcome back, sweet families, to the Called to Love podcast. I am so grateful that you are joining me today, and I am so looking forward to this conversation, and I'm going to get into why, but we are really going to be focusing on the duality of holding grief and joy as adoptive parents. And I have a new friend that I'm looking forward to introducing you to, Brandie Thomas. She is an author. She really is a woman of many hats and many talents, and she was sharing that with me as we were getting to know one another. Guys, she's got a wealth of knowledge and wisdom in her own experience as she is still sharing her parenting journey with her child's biological mother. And this is something, quite frankly, that scares a lot of us. It did me, full disclosure, 10 years ago when I stepped into adoption journey. And I was sharing with Brandie that I really wish that I had the heart posture then that I do now and an understanding that I do now. And so that's why I'm excited to share this conversation with you today. Brandie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Summer, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this topic today.
Absolutely. Me too. So let's let the listeners get to know you just a little bit. You were sharing with me all of the amazing things that you do. So just so they can get an idea of who Brandie Thomas is,
Yes.
Share with us a little bit about your family and what you do.
Yes. So like Summer said, we have an adopted son, Elijah. He's 4. We've been with him since birth, and we'll dive into that story. So I like to say I'm a boy mama, homesteader. I have 6 chickens. We built a fixer-upper and just renovated that this past year. So that's a whole another podcast episode of that journey.
I love it. My dream.
Yeah, it's been really beautiful to see God work in me and in that journey. From like a career side, I do kind of all the things, but I really specialize in system operations and helping clients who have a vision that God's given them bring it to fruition through technology. So I'll do business strategy and also build out all their systems. So website design, landing pages, email funnels, marketing, kind of automations, all the things to really get their vision to fruition. And then I'm also partnered with Kingdom Alliance, which is a Christ-centered personal and professional development mentorship platform. And that's kind of how the book, one of the books that I'm an author of, came to be, Restore My Soul, that I shared my infertility and adoption journey in that anthology. And so we just help Christians who really haven't been equipped and empowered to do the different things that God's placed on their heart, provide a place for that mentorship that's accessible. So whether it's in finances, whether it's in leadership, whether it's in becoming an author, we really just want to come around you and be that Acts 2 church where we're sharing our gifts and resources to really equip and empower you to go out and do what God's called you to do. So that's in a nutshell. Brandie Thomas, I guess.
I love it. That's fantastic. And I'm like, my head's spinning because she is so phenomenal at all the things that I am not good at. So I told her before we hit record today, guys, I'm like, I need her. Like, I need her
Yes.
to fix all my stuff. So I'm glad that we're getting to know one another. But in the midst of all of that, you said that you have shared your story, and it is such a beautiful story. And it's one that I feel like you share in common with so many of our listeners today. And that begins with infertility, and that led you to adoption. And we've had episodes around those topics, but I think it's always good to hear just the personal story of others, and our hearts can connect in a very unique way. And so share a little bit about how your infertility journey led to adoption.
Yeah, so I think to start there, I have to go back to when I was 20, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And then at 23, I actually had my colon removed. So I have an ileostomy bag. And I did that surgery at that young age to become a mother. So when we finally started trying around 27, I went back to school, got my master's. I was in like the matron of honor of in 3 weddings. So I was like, let's wait. So we did a little bit. And at 27, we started trying to start our own family. And it, a year goes by and like nothing's happening. And so I start to like dive into reasons why, like what's going on. And so for me, it was unexplained for many years. And I don't know how deep you want to get into like the whole medical side of things. If you want to go there or not, we can.
Whatever
But
you feel comfortable sharing. I mean, I'm
okay,
sure it relates to our listeners.
yeah. I told Summer, I'm like, I'm an open book, so I'll go wherever you want. But
I love it.
for me, it was very frustrating with the Western medicine. And it wasn't really until I started advocating for my own health and finding crunchy or naturopathic um, physicians that would be willing to go into deeper root causes that I finally was introduced to somebody who specializes in NAPRO technology and the Creighton method of tracking. I don't know if you guys have talked about that before, but essentially, like,
No.
um, the Creighton method of tracking is using your cervical mucus to see when you're ovulating, and also like tracking the different phases of your cycle. And they partner that with Western medicine. So like you're getting blood drawn to check your progesterone and estrogen levels. And so that was very telling that was like the first time where I finally had peace around my fertility journey of like, okay, like I finally have an answer and maybe I can fix this, maybe I cannot fix this, but at least we know what. So for me, it was just like I wasn't producing enough cervical mucus, which is what you need to take the sperm up to the egg. So that finally gave me at least peace around that story of brokenness and being like, what's wrong with me? Why is my creation broken? Like that was, I think for me, I was grieving my creation being frustrated and broken. And it took me a while to get to that point where I had the vocabulary to actually to understand why there was so much grief in my story of infertility. But I finally came to the realization it was like, I'm grieving the loss of what I was divinely designed to do.
Yeah.
And that reality that my creation may not be able to do what God intended it to do because of the fallen and broken world that we live in. And wrestling too with God, I'm like, God, have you forgotten me? Why haven't you heard me? Like you heard Hannah, you heard Sarah, you heard all these other women in the Bible. Why have I been unseen or unforgotten? And when like so many people in my life are getting pregnant, it's just like in your face a lot. So there's definitely been a grieving journey that I've been on, and God's just been so sweet. And I'm at a point now, like I'm 36. So that was 27 when I started that journey. I'm at a place now where I can actually be grateful to the unborn children and just be grateful to Elijah and just the story to know that I'm still believing for children. But I've also come to the space where like I may be the mother to the motherless, and my my journey to motherhood may not look the way I had planned it, in my 20s. And so coming to that place though, where because I haven't had children yet, I have been on a journey of healing and deepening my relationship with God, deepening my relationship with how I steward and take care of my body, deepening my relationship with myself and understanding trauma that I needed to heal. So when I do get the chance to be a mother again, I'm going to be a better version for them because I've been able to heal some burdens and broken places in my story that I no longer have to pass down to that next generation. And that hopefully, Elijah has taught me a lot, but hopefully I'm also breaking generational chains for him as well with the work that I've been doing because of this infertility journey and this adoption story. So yeah, that was a lot. I'll pause for a minute.
No, that's beautiful. I love that so much. And I think that it's I just appreciate you being that open book because, and being able to put words to that, because like I said, so many of our listeners are sitting in that space and some part of that journey. And so it's beautiful to see where you are, because you're not through it. It's not something that you're talking about past tense. You're still experiencing it. But again, the posture of your heart is such that you're like, okay, through this struggle, the Lord is teaching, the Lord is refining, the Lord is sanctifying. And that's where I think it can be a challenge for us when we add in that adoption component, because infertility is its own grief. And we went through a brief season of that as well before our second biological son was born. And so I have a snippet of what that feels like, but not to the extreme of what you're describing. And then we did have adoption on the other side of our story. And I think for me, it was, well, I can't do this, therefore adoption is going to fix this. And again, wrong mentality. And I didn't realize it. And it was well intended, but in my mind, it was like, well, I can't do this. So I'll do this. And this will just solve the whole thing. And it'll build what I think I want. And what I didn't realize was I was going from grief to grief. And I think that's one of the things because we've talked about it a little bit, but adoption, there is grief in adoption. And I'm not trying to be, Debbie Downer here in this conversation, but just bringing light to the reality of where we are and maybe help some of our listeners along. And so talk about that a little bit as you're walking through that grieving process. You're coming into realizations. The Lord's holding you through all of this. He's revealing things to you and walking you through this process, and then adoption. How did the Lord lead you to that?
So adoption came into our life. That was like the first time I audibly heard the voice of God be like, you're going to adopt. Wow. And so I was, when I first heard that voice, we were pretty early in our journey of just trying to get pregnant. And so I brought that back to my husband and I was like, I feel like God wants us to adopt. And my husband was like, yes, like I definitely see adoption in our story. We had experienced that through his brother who adopted their biological niece through just unhealthy circumstances with her biological parents. So I knew like Emily and I loved her. So like we just had a strong bond. So I already knew I could love a child that was not mine, and I could bond with somebody. So that part didn't necessarily scare me. But my husband, Jeremy, was like, hey, let's try to have our own child first. And then like adoption was going to be more of like a secondary option for us. It was never our first choice. Right. And so we waited for 4 years, and then 4 years went by and I heard that voice again say, you're going to adopt. And I was listening to a book on audio, and the author was sharing her story of adoption. And I was just like, God, if this is you have to tell my husband to tell me, because I already been there, done that. And he kind of shut it down. And so that was in August of 2018. And that December, we're at a Mexican restaurant. I do share this part in this chapter. I was like, I'm, living my best life, munching on my, chips and tacos. And he's like, hey, we're not pregnant. I think we should start looking into adoption. Yeah. And coming the new year after holidays and stuff. And I just felt like the wish of the Holy Spirit, just like, remember, hear you. And like that conversation that I had with God came back to me. And so we went into adoption really just from an act of obedience and really unsure what to expect, how to even go about it. But God had divinely orchestrated every step of our journey. So at that point, we had moved to a new city, the city that we currently live in now. And we had been looking for a new church. So in January, we kind of started this church, and we're like, I think we're going to go here, but I want to talk to the pastor. And like my type A person had like a list of questions that I needed the box checked before we committed to building roots here. And one of the questions was, we moved from a different town that had a bigger church, which just had more. They had like an adoption support situation going on. And so I was just like, hey, we're looking to adopt. Like, do you have any sort of programs or resources? And they're a smaller church. So they're like, we don't, but we have a family who has adopted 8 kids, like foster to adopted. And they have a podcast and a book. And he's like, let me send you their podcast. The very first episode that I listened to was them interviewing the founder of the Adoption Support Center here in Indianapolis. So I don't think I mentioned, I'm in Indiana. And so we live outside of the Indianapolis area. But so I heard her story, and her story was all about having an open adoption and loving the triad. So it wasn't about just the adoptive parents and the adoption, but it's supporting the birth family and giving them resources as they're walking through their journey, supporting the adoptee throughout their entire life as they're going through different things, and then also having a place to support the adopted parents. And so I loved the concept of nobody was left out and everybody was seen and heard, and that they really did value the open adoption relationship. And as I was preparing to walk into the adoption space, like I was trying to educate myself on listening to podcasts from the adoptee experience, from the adopted family, from the birth mother experience, and trying to just really understand that. And then when we went into the adoption agency, they did a great job of equipping us. And one of the things that they said was adoption is not a cure for infertility. And that I am so grateful to them for acknowledging that and saying that, because it's not a cure. Like I'm still 4 years later after adoption, like grieving and working with a grief counselor through different parts of my story. Has Elijah healed a lot of things? Yes, because he has felt that void of motherhood that I do believe I've been called to step into. And so there are certain places where he has come in and restored parts of my story, and that's been a blessing from this adoption journey, but it is by no means discounted the loss and the grief that comes with not carrying your own child biologically. So just to kind of continue the timeline, that was in March of 2019. We were home study approved in July. We matched with our birth mother in October 31st, had Elijah January 2020. So like for us, when God said go, like it was fast. But I will say from July to October 31st felt like years. Like every day felt like a year. And there was some darkness that I walked through in that waiting season. And it was really, I also share this in my chapter in the book of just like really having some hard, nasty, ugly, messy conversations like with God, and like finally coming to him in my raw, real, authentic self, and not like the perfect Christian girl, but really having these raw, authentic conversations and learning that God is big enough to sit with me in them and it's safe. So that was like a huge, for me, just like revelation in my relationship personally and my faith. And the way I like to describe it is like, Jesus is just standing there with his arms open, and I'm just like punching his chest and like kicking and screaming. And then finally I just get tired and I soak into his arms, and he's just like, I've been waiting to just hold you and carry you and love you. And so I just like a mosaic work of art is how I like to describe that. Like I just felt so broken, and he just like picked up all these broken pieces and he created this beautiful piece of art within my story. But it was, I just see darkness, I think, when I look back at that time period. And then continue and like, right, God, he's in so many details of the story. It's so cool to like share it now, but walking through it, it's like, oh my gosh, this feels like forever. But our adopted mom, our birth mother, she was actually a high school student of my husband's aunt. So she's 2.5 hours away from us. And because of my husband's aunt, who was a blessing of a teacher to her and had created this bond with her, she trusted her enough, one, to confide in her that, hey, I think we want to adopt. And then also allowed his aunt to be like, hey, my nephew and wife, can I send you their information? And then she's like, you make your own decision, but I just wanted to share this potential family. And so we found out that once she knew that we were related to his aunt, like we were her choice. So because of my tech and marketing background, I didn't actually pay the adoption agency to market for us. It was our responsibility. And so instead of just only having Indiana, we could kind of go nationwide, but it was just funny that we ended up finding our birth mother 2.5 hours away through a family member.
Exactly.
So we got to meet her Her and her boyfriend at the time, we got to meet them on a Zoom call. Then we met them in person. They allowed us to come to the final ultrasound. And then we were allowed to be in the room, but then she ended up having a C-section. So like that part, we weren't there for that. If it would have been a natural delivery, I was going to be allowed to be in the room, and then Jeremy would have stepped out, which I totally understand her like not being comfortable with him being present for that part. But we were there for Elijah's like first moments. Like as soon as he was pretty much cleaned up in the nursery, the nurses came and got us. We had our own hospital room. He stayed with us during the night, and then she would just text us like, hey, I want to see him, I want to hold him, feed him, such things. But we got to give him his first bottle, his first bath. Like we were there for like a lot of key first moments. And so that part was beautiful. But like my first sentence, like I was sharing you, my first sentence in the chapter is like, no one prepared me for the heartbreak of taking him from her loving arms. And I was not prepared for that immense grief that was coming along with this immense joy of like, we finally get to be parents and we finally have a baby in our arms. But oh, by the way, there's this whole like package of loss and trauma that we're bringing with us. And how do you carry that? So for me, I was just like, she was crying, like the tears were coming down her face, and I'm like trying to figure out this car seat. Like I'd never really worked with a car seat. I'm trying to, and they make you get in a wheelchair and wheel you out. I'm just like, I cannot get out of this room fast enough. And I was just like, don't cry. It's not your time. You cannot cry. This is not your space. And I just felt like I needed her to have that moment to like, it wasn't about me and my emotions. It was about her. And so as soon as that door slammed, I completely lost it. Like, just like, I'm sure people walking down the hallway were like, what is happening with this lady? Because I'm just like ugly crying. My nurse, though, another like divinely orchestrated, her name was Tammy Sue, and that's my mom's name. And it was like, God sent me my mom to just kind of hold me. And she was like so sweet. She prayed for us in the parking lot. Because my husband left to go get the car. And so it was really just her and I. And I'm just like, it's not supposed to be this way. And it's not fair. And like all the things, just kind of feeling everything.
Yeah.
So, oh man. Yeah.
Hey families, I cannot believe that we've reached this point in the year to where we are talking about this, but here we are. There is nothing quite like finding the perfect gift for the special people on your Christmas list, but let's be honest, it's so easy to feel uninspired, especially when life gets busy as foster and adoptive parents. We've all been there, scrambling for ideas, wanting to give our people something really thoughtful, and then experiencing the chaos of shopping and all the things. Makes me want to panic just thinking about it. Well, Christian Parenting is here to help ease that stress. They have put together a Christmas gift guide packed with faith-based products and experiences all in one place. So you can visit christianparenting.org/Christmas to get your free Christmas gift guide today. This guide is designed to make your shopping easier and more meaningful. Whether you're shopping for kids, parents, grandparents, or friends, we have ideas that are perfect for every age, stage, and interest. Christian Parenting also has amazing Advent resources for your family if you're looking for fun and creative ways to keep Jesus at the center of your Christmas season. These are resources that are in the guide as well. From family activities to devotions just for kids, you are guaranteed to find the perfect Advent resource that you have been looking for. So again, head over to christianparenting.org/Christmas to get your free Christmas gift guide today, and I'll include that in the link in today's show notes. Now let's get back to the conversation. That's incredible. I'm feeling all of this with you. And quite frankly, the parallels of our story are crazy because we just experienced very, very similar in our process. But you were far more keenly aware of her feelings and of the grief than I was. I think and I've said this before, I mean, apart from giving birth biologically to our two sons, I've been so grateful to be able to do watching another woman give birth to my child. that's probably one of the most surreal things that I'll ever experience. And so I did feel the weight of that. I don't know if she just put on a really good face in those 24 hours that we were together before we ended up kind of parting ways, up until today. We have not seen her since. But she was just so full of joy and calling me mom and all these different things. And so to hear your side of it, the raw and the real, and identifying that grief, and it is such a gift. You know, she chose life, and she chose to welcome you into that. I mean, things that she was not obligated to do, but yet she did. And so the beauty and the sacrifice of that is just so touching. And I think I want to go back to for a second. You were talking about, y'all met on Zoom, and then of course you were in the room together in these unbelievably intimate and life changing moments. I mean, these are monumental moments in anyone's life. And to invite a stranger into that is just incredible. And so, and also awkward, so
Yes.
talk to us about that of just,
Oh, yes.
for those who might be about to experience that, or maybe they're in the throes of experiencing it. What advice and what counsel would you
Mhm.
offer to embrace a stranger in some of the most vulnerable life moments?
Ugh, yes, awkwardness is the key word. Like the ultrasound, when I was like, I barely know this woman, and she's here with her belly open. And I just am like, the immense strength that she had to let us into this space,
Yeah.
and also kind of feeling like an outsider who doesn't belong there.
Yeah.
And kind of the same with like the laboring. So her boyfriend at the time was there, and her father was there. So that was kind of cool. We have met both biological dad and then both biological grandfathers on both sides. So we do have that information at least to tell Elijah as he grows up.
Mm.
But yeah, it was awkward, but also like beautiful to be allowed to be there. Like we held her hand, we rubbed her back. Like Jeremy would go get her food because she labored, her water broke on a Sunday morning. And then we drove the 2.5 hours, but she just took so long to, she was 16 when we met her. So I think she may have been 17 at the time of birth, but she just labored so long, and like their heart rate started to get messed up. So they ended up doing the C-section.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely there was definitely feelings of like, I don't feel like I'm supposed to be here. Like, this isn't my time. This isn't my
Yeah.
moment. And I felt like I was stealing moments, if that makes sense. Like,
Mm.
I was
Oh,
keenly aware that this wasn't my child. And I was trying to almost force it. And like, I remember being like, I want to help. We did the skin to skin, and we were doing, and it was like trying to capture these memories so that I had them for him, but also feeling like these weren't my memories to take or to have. Like it was just like a weird place to be in. Um, and yeah, like there was some things that happened in the hospital. I was just like, I don't know that even legally we were supposed to do some of these stuff. But like the nurses were like, the nurses asked us for shots, and I was like, I don't know if we're legally allowed to allow you. Like, and
yeah.
so there was just some things that I would do different now, like going into it, to be like, this is the mother's, like, we have not signed the paperwork yet. There's some things that I
Right.
don't think that we should have been given permission to give. So I would say,
Yeah.
like, also just side note, like, ethically, I've learned a lot of different things too, to like look for if and when we do
Yeah.
another adoption. Like, there's certain things I'll probably do differently. But for the
Mm.
most part, I do believe our story was just really clean, and it was filled with love. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was, yeah, I would say it was like, there was a lot of awkward, and like, the story I didn't share was like, we had a baby shower. That was probably another really awkward, because you're like opening presents for a baby that you may or may not come home with. And people
Yeah.
are staring at you, and you're used to going to a baby shower with somebody who's pregnant, and you're not pregnant, and it like, so there's definitely a lot of awkwardness, and you're fumbling with words, and like, do I call her birth mother, and like, what are we going to call her after the baby's born? And so
Yeah.
for us, we do have an open adoption. We're going to see her this weekend. She's pregnant again, and we're going to go up and celebrate her. And her partner are going to have a baby, and so we get to be a part of that. And she's come to Elijah's pre-K graduations and Christmases. And so we are very much involved in each other's lives. So for me, I think yes, Elijah is my son. At the same time, though, he's also not my son. And so I think balancing, he has two mothers, and looking at it from a place of he actually has a double portion. And so I look at it as he gets a double portion of love and a double portion of mothers and fathers. If his bio father ever does decide to come back, he kind of dipped out within our first year. That we did have a year with his bio dad where he would show up for visits and stuff. And so I'm grateful to have that knowledge to share that history with Elijah as he grows. But yeah, I would say, and our first meeting, which happened to be on Mother's Day weekend, was very awkward because you're nervous and there's all the grief around Mother's Day. Yes. But we wanted her, she is a mother, and we wanted to honor her. And so we did go up on that Saturday of that weekend, and I'm just how do we interact with her? So I kind of just take a back seat of being this is her time with her son, and she can feed him, she can change his diapers, she can bond with him however she wants to. And I still do that today. It's really I just kind of sit in the background and let them bond with each other, talk, play with each other. And so sharing that role, I don't know if that's answered your question, but yeah, it's just I feel we're continuing to fumble through the different transitions of life. And so we do call her Mama Paige. And that was one thing. If you are looking to adopt and you're worried about what do we call them, I'm worried about the open adoption. I think that was something we had to fumble through, is almost your ego can kind of get in the way if you're not prepared for sharing that role, I think, because sometimes you want to be this is my child, I'm his mother, and I'm afraid that if he knows his bio family, he's not going to want to be with me anymore. And I just had to strip that. I feel that is a lie, and I just had to strip that off and break that down and process that. I remember there being a point where she wanted to give him a present or bring him clothes, and I was just does she think I can't provide for him? And it's it's not about you, Brandie. This is her way to provide for her child that she's not going to get to raise. And so I definitely had to, I think, having the maturity that I had, because I was in my 30s, so I walked through a lot of life coaching and mindset, and I was able to kind of compartmentalize different things. I think that having that emotional intelligence helped me navigate a lot of this. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's definitely times where I had to be oh, she wants to name him. Am I actually going to bond with him? And realizing, so that was two things that we had to work through that were kind of awkward. We're what are we going to call her after the fact? Because we are going to do open adoption. And then they wanted to name him. And I was just okay, he's not biologically mine. I have nothing to give this child that's mine. And so I did struggle with the name a little bit, but then, God kind of you're kind of okay, let's take a breath, let's step back, let's not freak out. It's okay. What do you want to name him and why? So those were the two questions that we asked. And you always legally, you do have the right to change your name, but if it was something we can honor, we did want to honor. And our adoption agency actually was able to prepare us for that. They brought in a birth or adopted family, and they also brought in a birth mother on one of our training sessions that we had. So we got to hear different sides, and one of the couples went through that. And so they shared how they navigated the naming. But his name is Elijah Leon Scott. And so Elijah, obviously, I was why didn't we think of that name? That's amazing. I love that you picked out a Bible name, perfect. And we're yes. Leon, what's up with Leon? And they're well, all of the men have the same middle name. And I was I can totally respect that, because all the men in my family have the same first name, but they go by so it's Richard Linden, Richard Zachary, Richard Dwayne. And so I'm I can respect that. And I definitely do not want to take that part of his identity away. And then we just had our Scott. So we just tagged. So he's got 4 names now. And, we were able to work that out. And then the naming, so this was really helpful. for the adoption agency to prepare us to be like, when you go visit your birth family, it's no different than visiting grandma and grandpa, aunt, uncle, mama, birth dada. So we call her, I'm not going to say her name on the podcast, but we call her, I'll just say Mama P. But we're mommy and daddy. And so that's how we refer to her, because we want him to know, because it's open, like we're not hiding the fact that he's adopted. It's part of his common language. So as questions come up, we'll be able to just matter of fact answer them. But I think the language of like, this is your mama, you get Mama Paige, we're going to go see Mama Paige, it's a good thing, we're excited to see her, we love her. But he knows like we're mommy and daddy, and so we do have that sort of separation, but it's no different for us. Hey, we're going to go see Auntie Natalie, and we're going to go see Grandma and Grandpa over here. And so that helped us with like the open adoption part of navigating those relationships. So
that is amazing. I love that so much. And yes, I mean, you answered the question in abundance, and I've just, through your experience, have taught so much. And I love that. And I want to go back to something that you said earlier, because I feel like I can hear the listeners going, wait. What did you wish you would have done differently?
okay.
So let's talk about that. For those who they're on the front end of this and they're like, I want to learn from what you've already learned. And so let's back up to that just for a moment and share, if the Lord calls you to do this again, what are those things that you would do differently?
Well, the main one that stuck out to me was the nurse asked us if we should give him a shot. And I was just like, I don't even know what the shot is. I don't know what it's for. I don't know if I have a legal right to that. So I think really understanding what are my legal rights pre-adoption papers signed versus post-adoption papers being signed, so that everything is ethical and kosher. I was like, in this hospital, they worked with a lot of adopted families. And so they seemed like our room was ready when we got up there. Like they knew we were coming. They had it prepared for us. So this hospital, they did a great job, but they treated us like the parents from the get-go. And I don't know that that was really ethical or correct to do. And so I would almost, going into it second time, like as first time parents, right? Yeah, it feels great. Like they're treating me as mommy and daddy and they're giving me decisions. But I don't know if it was my right to do that. Like we got the first chance to have skin to skin, and I didn't realize that she wanted that opportunity. And so there were some parts of, I just feel like we needed to have a better plan. Like we had talked about, like, yeah, the baby's going to stay with you in your room, and then we're going to kind of share him throughout the day. Because of the timeline, Elijah was born at nighttime, and it had to be like a full 24 hours before she could sign paperwork. So it ended up being Tuesday in the afternoon before like the social worker and lawyer could come up. But I was really I didn't understand all the ethics that needed to go in pre-adoption. And so certain things like that, where it's like, well, I wish I would have advocated for her a little bit more and be like, well, do you want to be the one who gives to tell the nurses like what can and cannot go on the child's body after they've been born? Do you want to have the first touch with your child and have that moment for you? And so those were moments that I felt like, not that I stole, but they're a little tainted because I didn't know, like, having skin to skin with Elijah for the first time is forever going to be like a beautiful moment that I get to have. But it's a little tainted now knowing that she wanted that. And I took that first moment from her, or the nurses, just assumed that because she was adopting, like she doesn't get a say in that. So for me personally, I wish I would have had a little bit more of an understanding of that pre-adoption conversation, because I felt like that was more happening with the social worker and her. And so we were kind of like, they were just like, here's what's going to happen, here's what to expect. But I didn't fully understand, like, she is also his mother. And she may want to have these moments before she releases him to another family for the rest of his life. And that makes me a little bit emotional saying that, but like, just, like I feel like sometimes we don't honor the sacrifice that these parents are making. And to me, it was like one of the most beautiful examples of Jesus sacrificing his life for us for
Yeah.
unconditional love. And I felt like that's what my birth mother did for us, is like she wanted him. It was a healthy situation. It wasn't like she was doing drugs, you know. She had a boyfriend. They got pregnant and she couldn't circumstantially provide for him. But she still loves
Yeah.
him immensely and wants to be a part of his life. And
Mm.
so I wish I would have had a little bit more wisdom around how to protect her and advocate for her a little bit more. But you're right. There was this wrestling of like almost entitlement of like, okay, this is finally my turn. It's my chance. I deserve these things. I deserve these moments with him. But looking back, it's not about me. It's not about her. It's about Elijah and what's best for Elijah.
Yeah.
And so 4 years later, now he's 4 years old, and I've continued to just like do a lot of work on myself and mindset and just learning different things. I just feel like adoption, we need to enter into adoption where it's like, it's not about us. It's about what is best for this child and how do we advocate what is the most healthy life outcome for this child. And that's why
Yeah.
I do advocate for open adoption as much as helpful, possible. And we have we are blessed with the ability to have a very healthy open adoption with his birth mother. And I know that's not always possible. And open adoption could be an email inbox that you send pictures to like what we have, where we're like kind of intertwining each other's lives. But yeah, I would say that's what I would do different, is just advocate more for her and try to. It was almost like they separated us a little bit, and I understand why the adoption agency would do that, but I just wish I would have had the wisdom to actually, and the courage to ask her, what do you want this experience to be like?
Mm.
And how can I come alongside you and support you
Yeah.
as you're walking through this? And there's been a
Yeah.
little bit, it was almost like we were walking on eggshells for a little bit. And since then, we have been blessed to have very deep mama to mama heart conversations.
Yeah.
And I know going into adoption, it's very new. And like ours was pretty quick. Like we met them on October and he was born in January. So we only had like 3 really encounters leading up to the actual delivery scene. And
Yeah.
so not everybody gets the opportunity. Sometimes you're like, the baby's born, here it is.
Yeah.
But I would say if you do have the opportunity to have a little bit of time with the birth family, just like whether it's you or the agency that you're working with, get really clear and make sure that if the birth mother's not telling you, like actually have the social worker, I think, communicate and ask those questions. Like, what does it look like at the hospital? What does it look like as soon as the baby's born? What does it look like leading up to like the signing of the papers? What does it look like after we sign the papers and we actually take like every situation is so different. So I think really understanding what is your adoption situation, because like we were there to take him from her arms. And I think sometimes the
Yeah.
baby is coming from the social worker, so you might not have that same experience as me. So I think just understanding what is your adoption story going to be if you have the opportunity, and asking more questions and advocating for all parties of the triad to be
Yeah.
seen, heard, and just like, yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And that's fantastic. And I love that perspective. And again, I wish somebody would have shared that with us going through all of that, because it's a whirlwind. It's surreal. Your body's kind of in shock, and just
Yes.
there's so many feelings wrapped up in those moments. And you look back and you're like, wow, what just happened? And then you try to move forward with life and what life looks like as a new family unit, and bonding
Yes.
with your child. And I'm like, I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh, but I gotta ask. If you've got the time, I gotta ask.
Yeah.
Two things really I want to talk about before we end this conversation today, because it's just so rich with wisdom. The first one is what that looked like for you connecting. with your child that was not biologically yours. And then the other thing I want to talk about is what hard conversations, or have there been hard conversations that you've had to have with bio mom, maybe even in the way of disagreement or just not full alignment in any given situation. So let's back up and talk about connection for a
Yeah.
little bit, because I think I was under the assumption that there was going to be this automatic, beautiful fairy tale, rainbows, unicorns, and flowers floating all around us type of moment, especially because I was the boy mom and then I finally got my girl, kind of a thing. And it was so opposite that I went from infertility grief and loss, then I went to the grief of adoption, and then I went to post-adoptive depression grief, because all of a sudden this connection thing did not look like what I thought it was going
Yeah.
to. How would you speak to that?
So I don't feel like it was, for me personally, I did not have that experience. And maybe it's because I just wanted a baby so much. And we were there, like I got to do skin to skin. Jeremy got to give him his first bottle. We gave him his first bath. So we had those connection moments. I would say it was more awkward leading up to the point of Tuesday at the signing of papers, because we're bonding with this child that we're 99% sure this is the child we're taking home, but there's that 1% chance that they could change their mind. So I would say waiting for the adoption papers to be signed was the longest. I don't even know if it was probably 20 minutes, but it felt like 5 years.
I get it.
And you're just praying, that was another thing. I had to come into it with a heart of being if this is not our child, if it goes the other direction, I was supposed to be in her life to help her get to this point, and there's something better for me. And so I had to kind of break off that expectation and the outcome to, one, I think just self-preservation, but also just to be God's going to work it out. If we were here for this moment, it was to help her be loved and get to this healthy point of delivery. And if they decide that this is the best for them to take baby home, then I have to be not okay with it, but open to that outcome and know that it was all about love. Love just had to conquer this situation. I would say once we had the final paperwork and we got to, we could not get out of the hospital fast enough. And we're just and I had to drive home because at the time I was driving this Subaru Impreza stick shift, and the car seat had to be behind my seat because my husband was too tall. And so he couldn't drive. So he's actually in the back seat with baby, and I'm crying the hour to my parents' house.
Oh.
Thankfully, my family was in the middle. And so we stopped there, and my mom had dinner for us. And I was just I need to hold the baby. I need to hold Elijah. And just kind of concrete this moment. Breathe for a minute and just hold him in my arms before any of my family. I have a huge family, so they're all waiting for us to be okay, can we come see him? Because I was nobody come to the hospital. We will come to you and introduce him. And so I think for that, it was more just okay, I'm safe now. I can finally love this child as my own. So that was, I think, more of my perspective. And we were able to get home with him, and I was home full time with him. So, I mean, we really did. I don't know. And maybe because I've had to kind of love other kids that, through just different, I was kind of auntie to a lot of kids. So I already had that experience of I can love this child, even though he's not biologically mine. It just wasn't as hard for my mind, I think, to wrap around that fact. But I felt I had to get to the place where it's okay, I'm safe now. I'm allowed to love him. I'm allowed to bond with him, and it's for real. And nobody can take him away from me right now. So that was my experience. And we didn't have any other children. So I think having my heart's desire of being a mother fulfilled, it was easier for me to soak that in because I had nothing else to compare it to. I'm sorry, I forget what your second question was.
No, it's okay. No, I think that's really amazing. And I love that. And I think for my side of the story, it was, I wanted to connect. I wanted to hold that baby. She just screamed night and day for the first 3 years of her life. And so there was this thing of, she wouldn't let me put her down. But as I held her, she screamed and pushed away. And so she was
Yeah.
dealing with her own grief and the in
Okay.
utero separation grief and all of that. But yet, and then also attaching to me as her primary caregiver. And so I felt pushed away and smothered at the same time,
Okay.
which was crazy. And quite frankly, she's almost 10 and we still navigate some of that.
Mhm.
And I think some of that is just a personality too.
Yeah.
And she's my little spicy girl. And I've come to understand and love that about her and know that the Lord's going to use that in big ways. But it about wrecked me in those early weeks and months and years of connection with her. So I love that you had that beautiful experience. And I love that you talk about finally feeling safe to connect, because it is this weird tension that we hold of, and I talk about this a lot, loving fiercely and holding loosely. I mean, we do have to hold loosely these children until the ink is dry, until it is final, until it is confirmed. There are so many unknowns with the process and the right for a mother to choose to parent her child, and what that means for us in terms of potential loss and legal risk and all of those things. And so, but I love your heart behind it. We did have failed adoptions where babies were taken out of our arms and processes were failed. And so your perspective of I was meant to be there. It wasn't an oops, it wasn't a mistake. I was meant to be a part of that story for that child, for that mother, and for our family to build our testimony as well. And to not see that as a waste. It's still a loss, but it's not a
Yes.
waste
Yeah.
in the story that God's writing for us. So I just think that's beautiful. And I just appreciate that so much and your heart behind that, Brandie. So my other question, and then we can wrap up today's conversation. And I'm so grateful for your time today. Is any how you've been able to navigate maybe any difficult
Okay.
conversations as you're sharing this parenting and this family journey, as you've extended your family
Yeah.
to include her voice, Elijah's biological mother's voice in his life. Have you had to navigate, or how have you had to navigate any difficult conversations or situations?
Yeah. So we have it, fortunately, like she definitely leaves all of like the parenting decisions up to us. So we don't really ask her opinion on different, lifestyle things and how we want to raise him. I would say the difficult conversations have been more between her and I, of just like hearing her story and hearing my
Mm,
story of leading up to the adoption and even post adoption. And she shared some things like, you know, it's been really hard for me when I drive away, and or just
mm,
like learning that she wanted to have skin to skin, and when she saw me having skin to skin, like that was kind of like a pain for her. And so those
yeah,
have been more of the difficult conversations. And she's actually been very supportive of how Jeremy and I are choosing to raise him. And even she's been like, he's a 4-year old now, so he doesn't always want to listen to me. And she'll be like, when we do visits, she'll like kind of help and be like, now listen, we gotta listen to mommy. And
that's
so she
great.
actually
I
is really
love it.
supportive and backing me up on that type of stuff.
Yeah,
And I kind of see her like as kind of a daughter in some way. Like I've we've kind of adopted her
yeah,
in a sense of just like I know I'm not that much older. Like she's 22 now, I think, and I'm 36. So I'm not like horribly older than her. But at the same time, I'm like we we just kind of take on a I've taken on a maternal instinct with her of just like she'll come to me
yeah,
for advice on jobs and how to navigate different things, and I just try to be that mentor to her. So that's been
I
really
love it.
cool to see because she just unfortunately doesn't have family, and so like for us to go up and celebrate with her is a really big deal. That we're gonna get to be there for her baby shower and celebrate that
Yeah,
with her. And it was really important that all three of us. I was like, "Do you want Jeremy to come?" And she's like, "Yeah, I
yeah.
want Jeremy to be there." So it's been, yeah, thankfully it's been more about like just mother to mother heart conversations versus like how we raise Elijah.
I love that. And that just it makes me so excited, because where there's a lot of fear and an assumption about who the biological mother is and what her story is, and you associate it all with bad and negativity and fear and all those different things. Just seeing you explain this and talk about, I mean, you said yes to adoption and God grew your family even beyond what you can imagine. And isn't that just like God? More than we could ask or think. abundance, joy, life-giving, all of these things. And so I love that that's your story. And I've heard that many times over with other fellow adopted families who have had the opportunity to just share life with their child's biological family. And so, friends, I hope this has just been an encouragement to you, just to hear Brandie's story. It has been an encouragement to me. I've even learned from you and just your heart. And I keep saying it, but just the posture of your heart is such an example, and something that I wish I would have been more mature in my early journey of adoptive motherhood. And so thank you so much for giving of your time and sharing your story. I want to make sure that our listeners can get a copy of the book that you have so beautifully shared the story in. So tell us a little bit about that and how they can connect with you.
So the book is called Restore My Soul, and it's stories of redemption, deliverance, and hope. So it's an anthology. I'm one of 14 authors told. My mom actually has a story in here as well, which is really cool to get to do this process with her. But my story specifically on infertility and adoption. And so it's on Amazon now. You can get it as a Kindle, or you can do the paperback version. It's been really awesome to see God just restore and redeem like so many stories. And so we just pray that this book brings you hope in whatever difficult situation that you're going through. So I'll make sure someone has a link for that for the show notes. But and then you can connect with me at Kingdom Mothers on Instagram. It's kind of where I hang out. So
Fantastic. Okay. I will definitely have those links in today's show notes. And Brandie, I just appreciate you sharing with us today. It has just been such a fantastic conversation. Guys, if you've loved this conversation, shoot a comment, send me a message. There's always an email in the links of the show notes for you to reach out. If you've got any follow-up questions for Brandie or for myself, please don't hesitate to reach out. I love hearing from you. And we are just honored to serve you in these conversations. And so, Brandie, thank you so much again. It has been an honor today.
Thank you for having me, Summer.
Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.